As Disney CEO Bob Iger has extended his contract through 2026, it seems like he just decided, I'm gonna piss everybody off. I tell you, it's been an incredible couple of days. First he came out and said that writers and actors weren't being realistic in their strikes, and they were disturbing him. Yeah, that went down like a house on fire. But then just today we got pictures from the set of the Snow White production, and I mean, look at the state of it.
Have you lost your reptilian-ass mind?
Now it's worth remembering that these aren't actually the Seven Dwarfs. Peter Dinklage put an end to that when he started calling the story backwards. It was the ultimate case of, I don't want other dwarves to be in movies, because if there are, they'll actually be competing for my future job roles. And so it reeked to me of just pulling the ladder up behind you. So instead, these are going to be the 7 magical creatures. And judging by the costumes on them all, I'm assuming their budget was about 20 quid. And let's be honest, when everyone's in the same frame, it gets worse, not better. And you have to remember with images like this isn't going to be some cheap Disney Plus fodder that they just stick on a streaming service and no one will watch. This is going to be in cinemas. If you thought what happened with The Little Mermaid was bad, I can't wait for this. In fact, the most entertaining thing about this movie was the story itself, because this had more twists and turns than an episode of Secret Invasion. Although admittedly, it is Secret Invasion, so it's not particularly hard. The thing is, these set photos were so awful and so unbelievable, nobody wanted to believe them. And so when the Daily Beast came out and said those set photos are fake, and we've spoken to Disney about it was kind of like, oh, okay, that's that then. Until the Daily Mail came down and doubled down, saying that Disney have confirmed that these are stand-ins for 2 of the actors, and that we're actually using extras for post-production photography, and these are definitely from the set. Really goes to show the value of some of these sources over at Disney, doesn't it? But it's not just how the movie looks which is setting this up for disaster. The main actress herself has even responded to jokes about being the politically correct Snow White, and she was like, well, yes it is, and it needed that. We had to go back, take a traditional story, and update it for a modern audience. Don't you understand how offensive it is? Because I wasn't in that movie, and therefore I wasn't getting paid, and that needed to change. Our version is a refreshing story. I'm sure we've never heard this story before. About a young woman who has a function beyond someday my prince will come. It's so refreshing. Nobody's ever heard that before. It's so refreshing that I even have a very recent example of the exact same story being told by Disney themselves.
It's also updated with the current times, you know? It's not just all about a boy, you know? It's all about what she wants for herself.
Please, could someone enlighten me how refreshing your story is if all of your stories are exactly the same thing? Because when that's from The Little Mermaid, this is from Snow White.
This Snow White is going to have a modern edge to her.
Cartoon was so focused on her finding true love, and it's really not even in her mind at all in this film.
Yes, this modern story has completely changed everything.
So focused on becoming the leader and how to find her own agency.
All because it didn't want to reinforce stereotypes from the animated film. I'm like, what stereotypes? Because this article includes quotes from the Restricted Growth Association, who seem to think that the animated story was referencing them. I'm sorry, but do people think that the Skrulls reference them as well? Because that's the kind of thing you're talking about. The dwarves in the animated movie weren't people of restricted height. They were entirely different species of being. They weren't just short humans, you know. There comes a point when you talk about Disney and the people involved, you're like, we're just kind of getting offended by our own ignorance, which is particularly impressive. But no, because of these magical creatures, they're not actually just going to look like this. Instead, a source connected to the production said they will be more like trolls in Frozen. They'll have 2 legs, 2 arms, a face with eyes, nose, and a mouth, but not actually human. So like the original dwarves from the animated movie then. In fact, when you start talking like this, it seems like you've become so progressive, you've actually gone round in a circle and ended up at the original position.
Often said that Marvel movies all end the same way, following some unwritten rule that you have to throw a bunch of plot.
And I can't help thinking that these remakes are almost like self-flagellation for Disney. Like, we've made so much money and been so successful because we produced all this good stuff, and so now we're going to produce trash and just throw the money into the fire as fast as possible. They've even gone back to the original material and put warnings up like this program includes negative depictions or mistreatments of peoples or cultures. Dwarfs don't have a culture to offend because they are mythical beings from another world. I'm sorry, but if we're gonna have to care about the feelings of hypothetical creatures, then making a movie is going to be 10 times more difficult. Wait, even Lady and the Tramp has been placed on a list due to perceived stereotyping. It's a story about 2 dogs. I'm all for protecting dogs, but when they're a cartoon, I think we can worry about it just a little bit less. Oh no, apparently they're offended by their accents. I'm sorry, but Disney, a supposed entertainment company, whose CEO has just extended his own contract, should probably have some bigger issues to worry about than the accent of a cartoon dog.
Almost there.
I mean, it's not as if the problems don't keep piling up on your plate. And I mean, these problems can take down a company. For instance, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has done so badly, I think we've now hit peak cope. I mean, yes, Indiana Jones 5 is a box office disaster, but don't call it a flop. You might hurt its feelings. I mean, if we've got to care about the feelings of mythical species and cartoon dogs, at this point, the feelings of a movie probably isn't too far-fetched. No, instead, in this article, their argument is, if it makes $500 million, it shouldn't be called a flop. Because losing $150 million on your movie doesn't mean you've flopped. Oh no, no. Because somebody saw it, and as long as somebody saw it, that's all that matters. So whatever you do, don't call it a flop. I'm sorry, Digital Spy, you're on your own on this one. In fact, I think BBC Culture had the best take on it, of does Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny mark the era of the flopbuster? I mean, look, if Bob Iger has done nothing else positive for Disney since he's returned, and he hasn't, at least they have spent $150 million or so to create new, incredible terminology. Between flopbuster and defenestrate, I'm a happy man right now. And I don't know what other terminology you'd use except flopbuster at this point. It cost $300 to $350 million for its budget, and it's made back $258 million in total, and they only take home about half of that. So $150 million loss, looking likely at this point. And that doesn't even scratch the surface of the problems that Iger is now lording it over. I mean, yes, we found out they are ruining Snow White, but that's now the expected pattern for Disney. You've lost the benefit of the doubt. You've lost the trust of the audience because you keep remaking films that the audience enjoys that Disney hates. And so they take it upon themselves to change them, to fix them, and to drive them straight off a cliff. That's why they're ruining Snow White. They ruined The Little Mermaid, and they destroyed Peter Pan.
Purple boy's magic.
No, this magic belongs to no boy.
And those are just the last three from the last few months. Disney's production is a conveyor belt, and they want to be a progressive conveyor belt, always moving forwards, off a cliff. That's why it's weird to me when he comes out and starts talking about the strikes. I mean, I'm not a fan of the writers or the actors' strikes, but when you're Bob Iger coming out and going, you're not being realistic and it's very disturbing, isn't the best play, because I don't really think you understand what the problem is at all. The problem isn't that they're striking and want more money. The problem is the people who are striking. Although occasionally the Writers Guild is accidentally self-aware. Ironically, Disney is more profitable with you striking than they are when you're making new flops for them.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
Another case of a man taking credit for a woman's work.
I mean, at the moment, with the Actors Guild striking, they have rules for members. They can't do premieres, they can't do award shows, they can't promote things on social media or do events. And the thing is, I read that list and I'm like, that'll probably help the movie. Actors not being able to talk on social media alone will sell more tickets. In fact, we had the Blue Beetle actor coming out and going, I can't promote Blue Beetle, although his reason why he can't do it is astronomical, to be honest.
Really wish that we could get it to you guys, but we need to stand on the right side of history.
We need to stay on the right side of history. I had to repeat that because you may not have been able to understand what he was saying due to the fact that he had his head shoved up his own arse. Isn't it interesting how the right side of history is just you getting more money? Oh, we're going to couch it in ethereal values, make it sound like this is all about justice. But really, it's always down to the same thing. How do I get more money? And yet Bob Iger's talking about their demands. I want them to get back to work. Why? If you're losing $150 million on the movies you're creating, not making movies is actually more profitable for you. At this point, the longer the strike goes on, Disney would actually end up with more money. And if you're wondering how during the strike this kind of stuff can go on, this is based in the UK. And Equity, the UK Actors Guild, has come out and gone, even if you're an American actor, if you're taking part in a UK production, your strike isn't legal here. And so the reshoots for Snow White or promo and stuff can still go on over here. Otherwise, Equity said they lose their breach of contract protections if they refuse to work over here. But no, instead, Iger decided to just start kicking the hornet's nest, talking about fair compensation and saying what they're after isn't realistic. And considering the set of challenges that this business is already facing, which isn't a problem with the business, it's a problem with the quality that you're pumping out, or rather lack of quality, and we literally have visible evidence of that right here. He's saying you are being, quite frankly, very disruptive, which, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the point of a strike. The funniest part is when he says it will be very, very damaging to the whole business. worse. I think, if anything, it might save Hollywood if you just don't make anything for a long time. When you come back, maybe people will have forgotten the horror that you've been inflicting on them for years. Give all those streaming services a reason to start translating K-dramas en masse. Give people quality for a while, and so when you turn back up, maybe they'll have assumed you've learnt something during the time. Not that I'm holding out hope for that. Because when it came out that Iger had said that the writers and actors weren't being realistic with their expectations, out came a She-Hulk writer.
I'm an American! I'm an American!
And said the residual check for my episode of She-Hulk was $396. And I'm sorry, but that really doesn't say what you think it says. Because the writer thinks $400 means I wasn't paid enough, and therefore I should have my wages increased. When really what it says is, so few people watched what you put out because it was so awful that you didn't get paid very much for it. And this is me saying that. And I'm She-Hulk's biggest fan. No one else on the planet wants you to get a season 2 more than me, I promise you. But let's be honest, getting paid residuals for that show at all is daylight robbery. I do love CBR's comment about it though. Cody Ziegler claps back at the CEO. Oh, those clapbacks proving that nobody watches your show. This is the Disney equivalent of when Star Trek Discovery pointed the phaser the wrong way at their own face. You're not doing what you think you're doing there, love. And that's why I think the strikes could be an incredible thing for Disney if only Bob Iger actually had the intelligence of a CEO. If he made the correct decisions, he might actually be able to save Disney as an entertainment company. All you've got to do is realize that the people on strike are the ones that are causing your problems. They're making shows that nobody wants to watch. Their movies are costing you hundreds of millions of dollars. And you're even saying they're not reasonable people that you can negotiate with. So my question to you is, why are you bothering? What's the best case scenario? You give them a small pay rise that they accept, take on board your advice about the things they're being unrealistic over, largely with regards to the AI, I assume, and the minimum numbers of writers forced to work on a production, and then they come back to work, produce the same crap they always have, and lose you hundreds of millions of dollars more. How is that a good situation for Disney, Bob? I really would like an answer. Have you even thought about that? Because I don't think you have. The only way you can get out of this, while the entire industry is shut down, is to start to replace the people causing the problems. You desperately need new blood with new ideas from a new place in the United States, which isn't Hollywood. And if anything, their beliefs should be the exact opposite of the ones who are on strike right now. And you know what would make people on strike a bit nervous? You proving that you're moving on without them. How realistic do you think they would be then? Of course, the odds of any of this happening is exactly zero. Because Bob Iger has spoken about his company losing money, and he doesn't see it as a problem with what they're actually creating. I'm sure Bob would look at this picture and have absolutely no idea what was wrong with it. I mean, all of his customers, all of the people he wants to give him money, can look at this and they immediately laugh. To the point where people immediately thought it was fake and couldn't believe what they were looking at. That's how bad this is. Many people would assume that's why you're losing money. That people didn't go and see Indiana Jones 5 because they didn't want to see Indiana Jones destroyed, and that's a problem with the writing. Not good old Bob, though. No, entertainment mogul that he is, master genius, CEO worth millions of dollars. No, good old Bob has a different theory about what the problem is, and that is that they're actually producing too much good content. Problem is that Marvel has been producing so many incredible Disney Plus shows that it's diluted the focus from audiences. They made so much incredible entertainment that you either ran out of money or time to watch it. That means you could only go and watch 2 movies a year, maybe 1 series on an annual basis. And with this much quality that Disney's pumping out, obviously, people had to be even pickier than normal. I have to say, it's pretty amazing that even when you're producing flopbuster after flopbuster, you still somehow find a way to blame the audience, Bob. It's a natural talent that I'm quite impressed with, I have to be honest. As far as Iger's concerned, it's not a quality problem. It's that they ended up taxing our people way beyond, in terms of their time and their focus, way beyond where they had been.
What you least expect that you're going to want to see is Thor going through a midlife crisis.
But we increased our movie output and the number of television series, and frankly, it diluted focus and attention. That is, I think, more the cause than anything. Now, it could be that they're talking about their staff, but CBR have said Iger addressed Disney's increased output for their streaming service, admitted that the growing number of shows has messed with fan expectations. But let's be generous and say he's talking about his staff. Why Why do you think that lowering the output of something will increase the quality? It probably will increase the quality of the CGI. I don't really care about CGI. You know what it won't increase the quality of? The writing. When it comes to writing, your quality will only go down if you are producing so many shows that you run out of talented writers. That shouldn't be possible. You've got the entire world to recruit from. There will be plenty of people that can write a decent television series. Even if it's not world class, it would definitely be better than the television series you've been writing now. Lack of time isn't a problem with your writing. It's the ideas that they have and the values they have and their lack of values, which is the problem. So it doesn't matter if you get the same talentless people back into those roles. Paying them more money won't improve them as a person. Because if you want evidence of that, let's just look at Secret Invasion. Something which cost $212 million for a budget. When I saw that, I almost fell off my chair. That's $35.3 million an episode, and in my reviews, I've been taking the piss out of it because I thought it was a cheap show. I can't do this anymore! It's just too ridiculous! Most of the scenes are two people in a room talking to each other over a table. How have you wasted $35.3 million an episode? It actually looks like this show is part of the Disney cuts, that they'd realised we can't spend this much money on Disney Plus shows. Let's do it cheap and just have a load of people talking to each other in a room. You don't need to give people more time to work on a show. You need investigators to come in to find out how that number's physically possible. Secret Invasion is expected to be over budget. It was filmed in the UK, where you get a 25% tax break just for filming it here, and you set an alien base in Brixton and used London as doubling for Moscow, as well as setting a lot of it in Halifax. That's what should be disturbing to you, Mr. CEO. How does somebody spend $212 million in Halifax? And I don't know, it just doesn't feel like Bob both knows what he's doing, but also has the ability to control any of it. Because no matter how disturbing he finds what his staff are doing, whether that be destroying people's childhoods, burning piles of cash, or writing the next flopbuster of the ages, as long as you tie yourself to the people that are striking, this is never going to get any better. I mean, at this point, we've got AI Spooks Writers Guild. They fear generative systems could take their jobs. I mean, I don't know, I feel like I've heard that somewhere before.
Of workers taking your trades. Workers who don't sleep, don't tire, don't age.
Yes, in Rings of Power, we portrayed the Numenorians as horrible people. What do you mean you're scared of the elves taking your jobs? Don't think like that, you bigot. I mean, I've heard of swings and roundabouts, but at this point, you're just slamming the door in your own face. And I think they have a right to be scared, because if anything, probably one of the things that Bob Iger is saying isn't realistic. As well as the writers just wanting arbitrary numbers of writers in the room so they can all sit around, be lazy, and do nothing. If essentially we can get paid for not doing any work, that is exactly what they would want in Hollywood. I mean, you have to remember, they were paid $400 for doing nothing, and they still weren't happy with it. But no, writers fear an AI future. They believe that increased use of artificial intelligence will reduce their writing incomes, while at the same time going, our craft needs to be respected. We cannot be digitally duplicated. I'm sorry, which one is it? Is it going to take your jobs and reduce your income? Or is there nothing to worry about as you can't be digitally duplicated? At the same time as John Cusack slamming studios because they'll scan our extras and own their likenesses forever and eliminate them. I don't know whether he means like defenestrate them. I told you I'd find uses for that word. I just find it funny we're going, we can't be replaced. They're going to replace us. If you're going to go on strike, please at least get one message and stick with it. It's not as if you're writing anything else. You should be creative enough to at least come up with a narrative that works. Actually, I don't know why I expected that of you. It's not as if you can do that in a TV show. Why would you be able to do it in real life? Because the failure and the lack of talent is becoming so obvious, even your actors are calling it out now. With Hayley Atwell talking about a frustrating moment in Doctor Strange 2 when you decided to kill off her character. She was like, that wasn't my choice. That doesn't really serve Peggy very well. You get to a point where you're like, well, couldn't you have said something? And if you couldn't, because that's the kind of era that Hollywood is in, don't you think that should change? If anything, Hollywood definitely need to embrace telling people the truth and just pointing out that sucks. You have no idea what you're doing and it needs to change. If someone had said that to Bob Iger, maybe he wouldn't be in his position for the next 3 years. Because if these are just the stories from the last couple of days, imagine what he can do in 3 years. Because he's at the point of actually admitting that the shows they put out have negatively impacted the Marvel brand. Oh, we just put out so many good quality shows, people have superhero fatigue. It's like, no they didn't. They've got bad show fatigue. You went from Marvel movies are really good, we love Iron Man, I'm going to see the next one because that's going to be good as well, to they've just produced trash for so long, the next one's going to be awful, I'm not gonna bother. That's not the fatigue of superheroes, that's losing the trust of your audience. You destroyed everyone liked about superhero movies. You got rid of all the characters that anybody cared about and replaced them with horrible abominations that are evil portrayed as heroes. Secret Invasion has the Skrulls trying to bring about the apocalypse, and they were reported as being morally grey. One guy's even like, if we just show them our hearts, they'll like us, as they're trying to murder the very people they want to appeal to. No, Bob has much bigger issues than his writers being on strike, like the morality of the writers themselves. It's not just that Snow White looks awful, it's the intention and warped values behind the changes which is the problem. If you hate what the original Snow White was so much that you think it has to be changed, then how do you ever expect to contribute to its legacy? Your intention shines through your work, and if you go into a remake with negative intentions, you get negative outcomes. And because your values are counter to your audience's values, how can you ever expect them to give you money for your work? We've gone far beyond just caring about the strike in a desperate attempt to get Hollywood writers back on side. You need to get the audience back on side, and that means you need writers who are like your audience, who can relate to your audience. And that means the people that are on strike are irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether you find a strike disappointing. Kevin Feige really disappointed that he can't continue with his shows. How do you expect him to lose even more hundreds of millions of dollars if he can't make the work in the first place to lose it? That's why when there's talk of Hollywood just waiting out the strike, letting the writers go broke before they start resuming talks, that way they'll be desperate and more willing to agree to things. I mean, you can see from the picture how that's being portrayed. It's like, yeah, they're the big guys with all the power taking advantage of the little guy. The writers are only getting paid $5,000 a week, you can't live off that. It doesn't matter whether they come back to work or not, if them coming back will leave you with the same problems you had before they left. I'm sure Bob Iger's really happy that he's got some extra years on his contract, few more millions in the back pocket. But the fact that anyone's had him back when he doesn't seem to have a plan of how to solve the problems in the first place is pretty astonishing. That makes me laugh when I see articles like this, talking about Mission Impossible, Oppenheimer, and Barbie, about the fight for IMAX studios and how they have to beg and bargain in order to get on the premium screens. You would have thought that bargaining would be pretty easy to do, wouldn't you? It simply depends from the cinema's point of view, who gets more people in. Whichever one will fill the screens the most will be the ones that get the most screens. This is basic business, basic maths. But now imagine you're Bob Iger's company going into those negotiations. On the one hand, you've got Mission Impossible vying for screen space, and you're going into battle with this.
That doesn't make any sense.
Can you imagine going to a company, telling them to take Mission Impossible off so you can put that on instead? I mean, look, a lot of stuff are filmed at studios near London, but did you have to grab every hipster off the street and bring them along? I mean, seriously, they were busy. They were going to a restaurant to eat off a shovel later. With your current quality, Disney, how do you ever expect to win a fight like this? And Disney obviously owns Star Wars. What have you got in the future coming up? Well, we got The Acolyte, whose actors are coming out and going, I could never have believed I could play a Jedi because I wasn't reflected when I was a kid. Can you see why actors not being able to talk on social media is actually now beneficial for the profitability of your entertainment? I mean, yes, the audiences will still hate it when they see it, but at least they won't know that in advance and might actually go for once. Because instead, The Acolyte really is just lining itself up to be yet another disaster. And if you've seen the trailer for it, you can understand why people are suspicious. Because as long as this is the quality that Disney are pumping out, and we've got a long track record of that now with The Little Mermaid and Peter Pan in tow to know that this is the quality they're pumping out, with astonishing budgets of things like $212 million for Secret Invasion, for which I have no explanation of how they could have spent it, then to me, the strikes just seem like Disney's main advantage at the moment, because as long as people are striking, they're not hemorrhaging money. And Bob Iger, despite his renewal, doesn't seem to be taking advantage of it at all. In fact, he's just doubling down on the mistakes of the past, insulting them, pissing them off, but still has the intention to bring them all back to carry on just like they were before. The problem is, just like they were before wasn't good. Their stock price has been collapsing over the last year, from its peak at around $125 to today, where it's 88. And yes, year to year, it means they're just down 3%. But that means you've lost an entire year's growth. If a company isn't growing, it's failing. And it gets worse, because they are down 20% over the last 5 years. Disney might as well have not existed for the last 5 years, and they would have been in a better place. And for that, what happens? Bob Iger gets rewarded. Despite seemingly having no plan, no way to change anything around, and no understanding of the problems that he's even facing, or why he's facing them. Because they all go from one foundational principle, one key assumption solution, which means the problem will never be fixed. And that is that the problem isn't us. No, it's that we made too many shows for our audience. Or we just spread ourselves too thin, but if we make less, then somehow, magically, it'll be good, despite the fact that we'll have the same people making it, completely unwilling to consider that it's the people that are the problem. They come up with all of these weird, arbitrary reasons to explain it in other ways, because you're not willing to confront the truth, that like in a horror film, the phone call is coming from inside the house. And unless Disney starts to look internally at ways that they can solve these issues, then they're just going to carry on, because you've got the same people who caused the last ones, causing brand new ones as you move into the future, this time with new contracts, higher wages, and larger residuals, which is simply a recipe for an even greater disaster in the future. But there is one upside to that. At least I get to laugh at it as it happens.
This is coming out in the theater.
Well, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.